What if I told you the strongest currency in modern history? The currency that backed empires, collapsed nations, and dictated the direction of global trade is quietly losing power? Not in 2050, not eventually, but right now and faster than almost anyone predicted. Because while most people still believe the dollar is invincible, a series of unexpected events, some political, some financial, and some deeply hidden, have started unraveling the foundation that keeps the US dollar on top. So the real question is, what is weakening the dollar so quickly, and why isn't the world prepared for what comes next? Let's uncover the story from the beginning, setting the stage, background, plus key systems, plus teasing twists, to understand why the dollar is losing power today. We must understand how it gained so much power in the first place. Before World War II, global trade had no single master currency. Some used the British pound, others used gold, and many used their own local systems. But after the war, something changed. America had two things that no other nation possessed: more than 2/3 of the world's gold supply, and an untouched industrial base, while Europe and Asia lay in ruins. This led to the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement, where 44 nations agreed that the US dollar would become the global reserve currency. Every other currency would peg itself to the dollar, and the dollar would peg itself to gold. This system made the dollar the backbone of international trade. But here's the twist: the very system that gave the dollar its power also planted the seeds of the crisis we see today. Origins: the rise of dollar dominance from 1944 to 1971. The world trusted the dollar because every dollar was backed by real gold. But then something happened. The US government began spending more money than it had gold to cover, mostly due to the Vietnam War, massive domestic programs expanding global influence. Countries like France noticed the imbalance. They asked the US, "If your dollars are backed by gold, give us our gold back." As more countries demanded their gold, the US realized the truth: there simply wasn't enough gold. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon shocked the world. He announced that the US would no longer convert dollars to gold. This became known as the Nixon shock. The gold standard was gone. The dollar was no longer tied to anything real, and yet, instead of collapsing, something surprising happened. Rise the petrodollar and the illusion of unlimited power to maintain the dollar's dominance. The US struck a secret arrangement with Saudi Arabia in 1974. The deal was simple. Saudi Arabia would sell oil only in US dollars. In return, the US would provide weapons, protection, and military support. Soon, every OPEC nation joined the deal. This created the petrodollar system. To buy oil, every country needed dollars. This forced global demand for the US currency, and as long as the world needed energy, it needed dollars. For decades, this worked flawlessly. But the arrangement created an illusion that the dollar's power was limitless. America printed money. Countries bought us debt. The dollar ruled global trade. But every empire built on an illusion faces a breaking point. Breaking point, the quiet unraveling begins. The cracks began showing in the early 2000s. But the real shift started after 2008. The 2008 financial crisis. The world watched the US financial system collapse from within. Trust in the dollar weakened globally. Massive money printing after 2008, and again during COVID-19, the US printed trillions. This triggered inflation not just in America, but worldwide. Weaponization of the dollar. When the US froze Russia's foreign reserves in 2022, countries realized something alarming. If your reserves are in dollars, the US can control them. This was a turning point. Nations didn't want their economic fate in the hands of the US. This accelerated what experts call de-dollarization. But the biggest cracks came from somewhere else, a place the US never expected. Fallout countries move away from the dollar one by one. Major economic powers started taking steps away from dollar dependence. China signed trade agreements with 40-plus countries to use the yuan, not the dollar. Launched the petroleum oil, traded in yuan. Built the Belt and Road Initiative, giving loans in yuan across Asia and Africa. Russia switched most energy exports to rubles or yuan, dumped nearly all of its US Treasury bonds. India bought oil from Russia in rupees, signed trade deals using local currencies. Saudi Arabia. This is the biggest shock. They signaled that they are open to selling oil in other currencies. Ending a 50-year tradition, this is the beginning of the end for the petrodollar. Once the oil trade becomes multi-currency, the dollar can no longer force global demand. Failed fixes, and why they made things worse. The U.S. tried several measures to preserve dominance. 1. Raising interest rates. This temporarily strengthened the dollar, but crushed emerging markets and increased global fear of dollar dependence. 2. Sanctions. Sanctions on countries like Iran, Russia, and Venezuela pushed them to create alternative financial systems. 3. Expanding military influence. Instead of stabilizing the system, this made other nations pursue economic independence even faster. 4. Printing money to fix problems. Every time the U.S. injected money, inflation rose, trust dropped, alternatives looked more appealing. In other words, every fix accelerated the dollar's decline. Modern parallels, shocking data and patterns. We've seen this before many times. History shows us a pattern. Every global reserve currency falls when debt grows faster than productivity, military influence becomes overstretched, trade partners build alternatives, inflation becomes persistent, trust declines gradually. Then suddenly look at past reserve currencies: British pound, French franc, Dutch guilder, Spanish real, Portuguese escudo. Each one followed the same rise and fall cycle. And now the US dollar is showing the same symptoms. Shocking data. In 2001, the dollar made up 73% of global reserves. Today, it has fallen to around 55%, a drop twice as fast as analysts predicted. BRICS nations now account for 36% of global GDP, larger than the G7. Over 80 countries are exploring or adopting alternatives to the dollar. The shift is not theoretical, it's happening now. Final takeaways: 3 clear lessons. 1. Dollar dominance was never guaranteed. It was built on agreements, trust, and global dependence, none of which are permanent. 2. The world is moving toward a multi-currency system, not one replacement, many alternatives. Yuan, euro, rupee, digital currencies, and commodity-backed deals. 3. The decline will be slow, till it's sudden. Like every empire in history, the fall begins quietly and accelerates when confidence breaks. Final warning, or open-ended thought: the US dollar won't disappear tomorrow. But its era of unquestioned dominance is ending faster than expected. The real danger isn't that the dollar collapses overnight. The real danger is that the world isn't ready for what fills the vacuum when it finally loses its crown. Call to action: natural plus serious. If you want more deep-dive explanations like this about global finance, currency power shifts, and hidden economic systems, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and share it with someone who still thinks the dollar is unshakable. Because the world is changing, and understanding it is the first step to surviving it.